Hi guys, I'm Angie. Welcome to my channel and welcome to the end of the year book tag. I know that everyone says this at their end of the year videos, but I can't believe that another year is ending. This year to me has felt so long, which I love. I love for time to go slowly, so I'm not necessarily mad about that, but I feel like a lot has happened this year. I feel like I've done a lot this year, but of course one of the biggest things, at least for me as obviously like a huge reader, is reflecting on all of the books that I read this year and just like the state of my reading in general. So the OG end of the year book tag is by Ariel Bissett. I was originally gonna do that, but then when I was looking at the questions, it kind of felt like I should have done it maybe a couple weeks ago or even like a couple months ago. I think that would have been a bit better if I done it then. But now that we're like literally at the end of the year, my thoughts about my reading in the books that I read this year are different than they were a couple months ago or even a couple weeks ago, honestly. So instead of doing that tag, I'm going to do Destiny Sidwell's tag that I think she did for the first time last year. This tag that I'm going to do is a lot more like kind of giving books like superlatives and stuff like that, which I think is kind of what I need to do to reflect on my reading for this year, at least at this present moment. Maybe next year I'll be a bit more organized and I'll do Ariel Bissett's tag maybe in like November. I guess I just want to say before we like really get into the tag is that this year was my worst reading year. Maybe not in terms of numbers, but just in terms of like books that I love and just like my feelings towards reading and the genres that I like and just everything. Like it's been a weird year for me in terms of that. You might be able to see it here that like it's hard for me to say like what even my favorite books of the year are or like even what my least favorite books of the year are. I feel like my outlook on the books that I read this year were it's just kind of bleak, which is really unfortunate, obviously, because obviously I love books. Obviously, I love reading. So it kind of does suck that, you know, this wasn't the best year for me. And I just kind of want to mention that because there's no way around it. And the only thing we can do is kind of, you know, go through it and hope that next year is a little bit better. And now that that's out of the way, I think we can go ahead and jump into the tag. This tag has 22 questions. So the first question is most disappointing read of the year. So I could name probably countless books for this, honestly. Like I said, bad reading year. As I was going through these, I didn't want to just like say the same book for every single answer. I have a good variety in my answers for these questions. So after some thought, I think that the most disappointing book for me was Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. And you might not be surprised that I find it disappointing because I know it is a very polarizing book. A lot of people do not like that book or the series, but I was really hoping that I would be one of the people that did like it. I was just really sad when I was reading it and kind of realized that I was not having fun like at all. I actually kind of credit like that book and that series to putting me into this book slump that I'm currently in at the moment. That even for me even makes it even more disappointing. That's like, oh, if I'd chosen to read another book, maybe I would be in a different situation. So I was really sad about that. And also I own the first 3 books. I own the first 3 like original indie covers, which I love. I think that the covers, like the original ones, are so beautiful. It's very disappointing what they've done to the traditionally published books. That is the most disappointing book. And then another book that I did want to mention, because like I said, there's lots of things that I could have mentioned, but I wanted to mention the most recent and last installment of the Zodiac Academy series. And while it wasn't nearly as bad for me as Magnolia Parks, it wasn't necessarily the worst finale of a series ever. It's just that series has just like kind of been going downhill, and it is a series I love a lot. I don't know if you can see it. I have like 3 different versions of the series. I really credit Zodiac Academy for like really getting me back into reading a couple years ago, like in a big way. I don't think that there's any way that I wouldn't have been disappointed in that book in some way or another, but it still sucks that I was still kind of a little disappointed in it. Question number 2 is Underdog Book of the Year. So for this question, I basically went through my Goodreads and went to the books that I liked, or at least liked enough, thought, you know, that I enjoyed reading. And then from there, I went to the books that had under 10,000 ratings, and I kind of consider those underdog books. Just some books that like more people should check out. And the ones that I wrote down were Bourbon and Lies by Victoria Wilder. This is a really fun book, especially if you are a fan of like cowboy romances. Well, it's not a cowboy romance. It's definitely kind of adjacent. They are like at a bourbon distillery in Kentucky. So it has like those country vibes for sure. It is also romantic suspense. So if you're kind of a fan of the Chestnut Spring series and you want something along the same lines, but with a bit more suspense, I definitely think this is something you should check out. And like the cover is also beautiful. Another book that I have is Grave Matter by Karina Halley. This is one of my most recent books that I just read. I am generally a fan of Karina Halley, at least of the ones that I have read, and this is her most recent release. It follows the main character, Sydney, as she joins this research program on Vancouver Island, and she's a mycologist, so she studies mushrooms, and that is exactly what they're doing at this research program. They're studying this very specific mushroom that like grows in the area. She kind of has a little thing going on with her professor. I think Karina Halley technically calls this a romantic thriller, and I would definitely agree. There's definitely some thrilling aspects. The ending to this book was bonkers, like just wild. Again, I guess it's also similar to the first book I mentioned, kind of romantic suspense in a way. Another book is A Proposal They Can't Refuse by Natalie Kanya. This is one of the first books I read this year. I think I read it in January. It's been out for a while actually, but it was very good. This is a contemporary romance between, I don't know if they're rivals necessarily, but they don't like each other, but they are like technically family friends. As you can guess from the title, they have to get into an engagement of convenience. I remember being very sweet and very fun. Also, there is like lots of Puerto Rican culture if that's something that you're interested in. The main character is Puerto Rican and she is working at the family restaurant, which is a Puerto Rican restaurant. The MMC, I believe he's like an Irish whiskey bourbon distiller, no, whiskey, I don't know. He works at a distillery and he's Irish. So I definitely think if you're looking for just like a nice, cute contemporary book, definitely check that one out. And then the last book that I have on this list is The Cruel Dark by B. Northwick. This is a book that I read, I don't know, a few months ago, and it's a gothic romance. The main character, who is kind of like recruited, I guess, to work as the assistant to this professor, and he lives at this like crumbling gothic estate kind of like in the Massachusetts countryside. It's like a little spooky. There's like, it almost seems like paranormal at times. It's really short. I think it's like max 250 pages. So if you're a fan of gothic romance, this is definitely one that you should check out. And now for question number 3, which is a book that was overhyped. For this, I do have to say Phantasma. I read it like when it was kind of popping off and everyone was like, you know, really, really hyping it up. And I definitely had some high hopes for it because everyone seemed to love it. And so I was like, well, if everyone else loves it, I also want to love it. And I don't think I hated it. I didn't even necessarily dislike it. The biggest problem with that book is just that there is too much sex, which sounds crazy. Like there's too much smut. I know that, you know, everyone loves smut. I love smut. But there was too much of it in that book. It was taking away from the plot that was kind of promising. Yeah, to me, that was an overhyped book for sure. Especially as time goes on, the less I like it, which makes it even worse for me. And then another book I feel like I do have to mention is The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Laurie Gilmore. I love holiday books and I love small town books, especially in the more recent years. I've been reading a lot of small town and this was so bland. And I really think that just has to do with the name, the cover, and honestly the author name, like Laurie Gilmore. That feels like that's a little too much for me, and I'm a Gilmore Girls fan. Yeah, those to me, I mean, there's probably like several others I can think of that were overhyped, but those are the two that I felt were worth mentioning specifically in this category. Question number 4 is my favorite book couple of the year. This was kind of hard for me because I feel like there wasn't a specific couple that I really, really, really attached to. I think that if I had to choose a couple, it would probably be Harriet and Wynne from Happy Place by Emily Henry. I specifically really liked Wynne. I just liked his character a lot. I thought that they were very sweet. I am a fan of second chance romance, and I personally am always going to feel that connection more when it is a second chance romance and when they have all that history and everything. And question number 5 is favorite main characters of the year. So I'm going to cheat a little bit with this one, but I think that my favorite characters of the year are actually in the book that I'm currently reading, which is Snowed In by Catherine Walsh. This is like a Christmas winter book and I'm having so much fun with it. 2 main characters are pretty funny. Honestly, like I genuinely think that this book is actually funny, which, you know, that's hard to find. And they're also both Irish, which really adds to like my enjoyment of this book. It's very hard to explain. But yeah, I would say that my favorite characters are from this book. Question number 6, a book that surprised you. So I think a book that really surprised me this year was Blood Orange by Karina Halley, another Karina Halley book. This was my second book that I read from Karina Halley, but the first one I read a couple years ago and it was very different than these. Blood Orange is like a vampire book. It is like kind of a Dracula retelling in a way. I don't know actually. The main character is supposed to be Dracula, or at least he is what Bram Stoker based Dracula off of when he was writing it. And then so that's the MMC is literally Dracula. And then the FMC is a witch, and she's actually tasked by like the witch council to kill Dracula, kill the main character. His name is not Dracula in the book. It's just like a very interesting dynamic because obviously they're going to fall in love at some point, but she's literally being sent there to kill him. And it was, again, a student professor. Anyway, question number 7 is a new favorite author you discovered in 2024. For me, that has to be Mariana Zapata. I know that Mariana Zapata has been around forever, but I had never read her before. A couple years ago, I tried to jump into one of her books and it like wasn't hitting immediately. And so I basically just decided from there that like I didn't want to ever read her. And then finally this year, I read a book by her, which was From Luke Off with Love. I was obsessed. I read that book in under a day. I was so obsessed with that book. And now I just want to read like her whole backlist. I think I really like the way that she does, like, you know, her slow burns. That's what she's known for. But I think also as someone who is just, you know, a little overdone with romance, I think I like that her books don't have a ton of smut and there's really so much focus on developing that relationship and developing the characters. So I would really like to continue reading her next year. Definitely. Number 8 was happiest read of the year. I think a lot of the books that I read are happy, especially since I do read primarily romance, and by definition, romance has to have a happy ending. But of course, with every book, it's not just going to be rainbows and sunshine. Like you have to have some other like element in there to make a story interesting and to make a character believable. So I guess I would just have to say the books that when I think of them, I'm like happy that I read them, or books that I think are like cozy. Because to me, being cozy is being happy. I wrote down a couple books, one book in one series. The book that I wrote down was Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. A lot of people love this book, obviously, and people love it for a reason. It is really just such a comforting book. It is such a simple love and just so sweet. And I can't think of anything happier than that. It's just like a sweet love. And then the series that I wrote down was the Queen's Cove series by Stephanie Archer. This is a series that I really got into this year. Technically didn't start it this year. I read the last 3 books. This is a series that I look back on very fondly. I had so much fun reading them. I think that they're just happy books because they're low stakes. They're in a very cute small town in Canada with like beautiful surroundings. To me, those are like happy books. And like, look at the covers. Like the covers are so cute and so happy. Number 9 is the most frustrating book you read in 2024. This has to go to Magnolia Parks. I know I've already mentioned it. I mean, the book is kind of made to be frustrating because, you know, Magnolia and BJ are in this like toxic relationship. So of course it's frustrating because you want them to not be in this kind of relationship, but it was very frustrating to read. And again, I know that is like kind of the point, at least I guess that's the point, but I can't deny that I was frustrated when reading it because I think at some point you kind of have this thought of like, yes, they're like meant to be together, but their like dynamic is super toxic, but also like, what if these two people never spoke again? Like those are the kind of thoughts that were going through my head. Another book that I have to mention that I have already mentioned is Phantasma because like I said, there was just like a lot of smut. So there would be something like kind of, you know, exciting happening in the plot, but then they would like stop and they would be banging for like 20 pages. Maybe not that long. I don't know how long, but it was just, that was frustrating because I don't like to skip through pages. I really don't. And I don't like to skim even Spice. I don't know why. I should just skim Spice. It's like not that big of a deal, but I personally just don't like to. So I was like sitting through all of these pages and I just wanted to like know what was going to happen in the story. Number 10, best adaptation of the year. So my answers for this are interesting because when I look back at the adaptations that were released this year and the ones that I watched, there's like no overlap on which ones I read and which ones I watched. So I'm just going to talk about the ones that I haven't read that I enjoyed. The first one I have is Dune 2. I mean, this movie was super good. Dune to me, even though I haven't read it and I do kind of know what happens because my boyfriend knows what's going on over there. And so he fills me in. So I think it's just a very interesting story. And the way that the main character is treated in the story is like so fascinating to me. So I'm really excited to see more of the movies. I mean, a beautiful movie. I'm like every other girl. I love Zendaya. I love Timothée Chalamet. I love Austin Butler. Who else is in that? Lots of people. I will say the only thing I can think about for like most of that movie is what the budget was for bald caps. The amount of bald caps used in that movie insane, like absolute insanity, the amount of bald people. And then of course I have Wicked, which is still out in theaters as I'm filming this. Haven't read Wicked. I've thought about it, but I don't know. You know, I don't want to ruin the charm that the movie has on me. And of course I know how it ends. Like I'm not super anti-spoiler or anything like that. So I do generally know how it ends. I'm not worried about that, but I don't want it to ruin the movie for me because I love the movie. The movie was incredible. Like I went into it not being that excited. I was a little bit excited. I went with my friend. We went like when it came out. I was blown away, like absolutely blown away. It was so good and so fun. Everyone did such a good job. I can't believe like honestly how good it was. So that is definitely one of my favorite adaptations this year. And then the last adaptation that I have is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I did watch that. I haven't read the book. It kind of made me want to read the book, but I don't know if there's any point now since I have watched the series. Not my favorite adaptation this year. I thought it was good, but it wasn't like my favorite thing in the whole world. But definitely worth noting. Number 11 is the longest book you read this year. If you heard me mention it earlier, you already know what this is, but it is definitely Zodiac Academy 9. I think it's called Restless Stars. And that book is a whopping 1,153 pages. I am not joking. Those books get so long towards the end because they don't really edit them that much, like not in the way that you would probably edit a normal book. And yeah, that was definitely the longest book I read this year. I also read it in a day. So those books to me are like junk food. I just like speed through them. It's also, that book is technically shorter than the 8th book. So yeah, if you're interested in reading Zodiac Academy, very cautiously recommend you do. Just know that those books get really, really, really long, but they're so easy to read. So it's like whatever. Question number 12 is of course the shortest book that you read this year. And the shortest book that I read this year is actually a short story. And that is The Lover by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I read this again first month of the year and I really liked it. I think I gave it like a 4.5. The Lover, from what I remember, is like this kind of like werewolf story, but it's very short and it's definitely worth checking out. I think it's only available on Kindle Unlimited. I think if you're an audiobook listener though, I think you can get it on Audible. And obviously it's super, super short. Question number 13 is my favorite book cover of the year. This actually might be kind of surprising to some of you, but I think my favorite book cover of the year is Swift and Saddled by Lila Sage. I just love this kind of concept that Lila Sage has for her Rebel Blue Ranch series. My favorite so far is Lost and Lassoed. These book covers are just so gorgeous to me. I'm a fan of like model covers and I don't mind cartoon covers, so I kind of like that this is almost like a nice little in-between. And I just like this kind of like postcard feeling that they have. I just really like them. Probably next year my favorite book cover will be Lost and Lassoed. So maybe surprising to you, but not surprising to me. And also when going through the list, I didn't really feel like anything super stood out to me. So this is what we're going with. Question number 14 is a book you haven't stopped thinking about. And for this, I kind of had to put From Lukov with Love. Like I said, I was obsessed with this book when I read it. Like, to me, it was almost like my perfect romance book. It gave me butterflies and it was just so much fun. So I think out of all the books I've read this year, I think that's the one that I probably think about the most. Question number 15 is the cringiest book you read this year. Okay, so the answer to this question, honestly, could have been in so many of the other kind of more negative categories on this list. And it is Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. I really thought I was gonna love this book. Like, I thought that I was gonna be obsessed with this book. And because so many other people liked it, and there were also like specific creators who I liked a lot of the other books that they recommended, and this was like one of their favorite books. So I was like, oh, well, I'm definitely gonna like it because I liked all the other stuff that they like. No, I don't understand why people like this book. I'm so sorry if you do. I'm so happy that you do. I wish I was you. I felt like this book was like really corny. I don't know. I really didn't like this book. That's definitely my least favorite book of the year, which is so unfortunate. Question number 16 is an unpopular book you loved. I kind of have an interesting answer for this, and that answer is none. I was again going through the list of books that I read this year, and I feel like I didn't really read any books that were like unpopular, because I think that's also hard to categorize a book as unpopular, because usually a book is unpopular in certain groups because it is like so popular in others, if that makes sense. So for example, when I was going through the books, I was thinking about some books that I heard some criticisms on, so I'd go check them out and they would have like a 4-star rating or like higher or like very close. So I'm like, well, that's not like an unpopular book then. So I don't think there's any book that was like unpopular that I loved and other people didn't. I do think that there are some unpopular books that I read that I also didn't like, or like I agreed with that. So yeah, there are no unpopular books that I loved. Question number 17. What was the highest and lowest rated books you read this year on Goodreads? And do you agree? So the lowest rated book that I read this year was actually the lowest rated book that I've ever read. When I went to go filter everything out, I was like, oh, well, at the very top of the list is one that I read this year. And that was Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay, which is sitting at a 3.37, which isn't like that low. I mean, it's not good. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it. I think I gave this like a 3.5, like a 4. So like I had a good time with it. I thought it was pretty fun. It wasn't anything too special. So maybe that's why people are giving it such a low rating. I think also, I know that Paul Tremblay is like a very popular author, but this was the first book that I read by him. So I don't really have anything to compare it to, which I feel like probably a lot of other readers like did have that comparison when they were giving it a rating. So yeah, I don't know if I agree with it. It doesn't necessarily surprise me that it was rated lowly, but I don't think I agree that it needs to be that low. The highest rated book that I read this year was Save the Cat Writes a Novel. I was not expecting this to be so highly rated. I mean, it's a good book. It's like a very useful tool. It's rated 4.5, by the way. Book, obviously, about writing novels. It's all about like plot structure and stuff like that. And it's very useful. I read it and I enjoyed it. I don't think I gave it a rating because it's like an instructional book. Definitely when I was, again, going through the list, all the highly rated ones that I read this year were all nonfiction. So, which I think is like, you know, people I think are more likely to rate nonfiction higher than they are fiction. Yeah, that's not surprising to me. This was rated a 4.5. Question number 18, favorite quotes of the year. So this is hard for me to answer because I'm not like a huge annotator. Like I annotate very lightly when I'm reading physically, but even then, like not so much, because I think if I like let myself annotate, I'll almost like overdo it. I'm one of those people that will just like highlight everything. So yeah, that's my whole thing on annotating. I think it's something I would like to maybe try to do more next year. We'll see. I think if I had to choose books that I remember liking the quotes of, I think it would be Happy Place and 7 Days in June. I think those are two books that I really like the quotes of, and I will put some on the screen. Here's some Happy Place quotes and here's some 7 Days in June quotes. Just because, I don't know, it feels, I'm a little embarrassed to read some of these out loud. Some of them, it feels a little cheesy, but yeah. These are some quotes I liked from those two books. Question number 19 is book with the most unique concept. And I think for this, I think I have to give this to Bull Moon Rising by Ruby Dixon. This is, I think, one of Ruby Dixon's, I think that this is Ruby Dixon's only high fantasy book, or it's like one of the few. All of the other books I've read from her, they do have some sort of tie to the real world, but this one doesn't. This is a high fantasy book. My favorite thing about this book, while it is a very good book, probably one of my favorites of the year, one of my favorite things about it is the world building in it. I think Ruby Dixon did such a great job with it. I haven't ever read anything like it. Of course, I'm not the biggest fantasy reader, but I felt like the world she created was very unique and very special. In Bull Moon Rising, we follow Aspeth, who like leaves her estate home to go to the city essentially, and she's joined what's called like the Artifactual Guild or something like that. And this guild is a organization that explores these ruins that are beneath the city, and they're trying to get all of these artifacts, these magical artifacts. I think that is just like a very cool concept. And then in her author's note, she talks about all the different things that she like got inspiration from. She got inspiration from like things like Stardew Valley, this like real thing called the National Geographical Guild or something like that, like the Sherpas on Everest, other like archaeological documentaries and stuff like that. Just like so many different things. And it was really cool to see all the different places that she got inspiration from. And that's why I think it's the most unique concept. Question number 20 is a book you read that you would reread. This is hard for me because again, I didn't have the best reading year. While I did read some good books this year, I didn't read like any all-time favorites or anything like that. But I think of the books that I read this year, some that I think I would like to reread are In Your Dreams Holden Roads, which is the third book in the Queen's Cove series. I would reread 7 Days in June. And of course I would reread From Look Up with Love. I did have a lot of fun with that. Obviously, I've said it a couple times. So yeah, I think those are probably some books that I would reread for sure. Questions 21 and 22 have less to do about me choosing specific books and stuff like that, but they're kind of more about like my past reading year and then my upcoming reading years. So question number 21 is my reading goal reflection and my 2025 reading goal. In terms of my reading goal, I'm not hitting it. Like I'm not even close. I think I'm at 73 books, and my goal is technically 100 books. oh God, what's that, 27 books? I have a degree in art history. I'm not good at math. I'm not gonna hit that, and I'm not that upset about it. There's a couple other years that I like haven't hit my reading goal before. I didn't hit my reading goal last year either, actually. And it's like not that upsetting to me. Of course, it's like a tiny bit disappointing. Like it's always great to complete goals and to hit those numbers, but also it's like whatever at the end of the day. If I put like that much pressure on me to like really finish and like really get to 100 books by the end of the year, that's not fun at all. On TikTok, I was kind of talking about how I'm not close to finishing, and a lot of people are saying to, you know, read a bunch of novellas, read audiobooks, read graphic novels, poetry, short stories, stuff like that. And those are obviously great options if you're trying to hit your reading goal, and definitely if that's something that you want to do, you should do that. But I don't know, I don't want to just like read a bunch of books just to hit my reading goal. That's not really what I want to do. Maybe in the past I would have. I know that there was a couple years ago I did, like a little bit earlier in the year, I read a bunch of novellas to kind of hit more of like a stretch goal. But yeah, it's just not happening this year. I would rather just read at my own pace. I'm in a terrible book slump. I think last month I read 3 books. I think this month I'm barely at 2. I don't know. I don't want to force myself. I'd rather just like finish this year off with having read over 70 books, which is a ton of books. Like that's so many books to read in a year, especially when you think of like how many books like the average person reads. It's like a lot of books. So yeah, that's kind of what I think about my reading goal from this year. I'm not going to hit it, and that's okay. As for my reading goals next year, I think I'll probably make a whole video just talking about my reading goal for 2025 because there is a lot to say, but I guess my biggest goal is just to enjoy the books that I read and really figure out what I like to read again, because there are days when I even question like, do I even like this? Which is so crazy because for years reading was like my favorite thing ever. Obviously. I mean, this is crazy. I even said, do I even like to read, and like look behind me, you know? So yeah, that's really my biggest goal next year, is just to read books that I like again. I do think I will make another video though talking about more specific goals I might have, because I do have a couple in mind. And then the last question number 22, after 2024 reading, what are you prioritizing in 2025 reading wise? So like I said, reading books that I like. I think specifically I want to read more audiobooks. There's a lot of things that I want to accomplish just like everyone else, and I feel like can do so much more if I'm listening to an audiobook, and I think that's just something I need to do, because I do enjoy audiobooks, and whenever I do read audiobooks, I am really like beefing up my numbers, you know? So that is something I would like to focus on. And another thing I think I need to do next year is I need to read for more genres than romance. Not that I hate romance, but I've been reading romance for like 2 years straight, like pretty exclusively. I definitely read, you know, a couple memoirs this year and like a couple thriller books and like 1 horror book. But I need to really just have some more variety. I don't know if I'm getting sick of romance, but something is not right. Something is going wrong here, and I need to figure out what the problem is. And the problem is that I'm only reading romance, I guess. And the issue is like I've consumed so much romance content and stuff like that. Like all the books that I think of like in my TBR and books that I want to get to are all romance books. So I kind of have to let go of that a bit and be like, okay, you can get to those books a little bit later, but right now you need to focus on like yourself and like what you want to read and like finding what you like. Again, just finding what I like to read. That is what I need to do next year. And that, my friends, is the very end of this end of the year book tag. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys had fun listening to me yap about the books that I read this year. I would say that I had fun reflecting a little bit. Now, this isn't like a end of the year wrap up. I know that I kind of talked just like about a bunch of books, gave a bunch of books some superlatives and stuff like that, but there's always more to talk about in terms of reflection on a year of reading, because that's a crazy amount of time to have read a lot of books. And yeah, sorry, this headband is killing me. I'm also happy that the video is over so I can take this headband off. Why did I think that this would be a good idea? Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. We are currently like kind of in the middle of my little vlogmas situation that I have started. My whole thing with vlogmas right now, since I'm just trying it out for the first time, my goal is just to post 12 videos by the 24th. So if you stick around, there will be more videos coming out very, very soon. And I would love it if you stuck around. That would be so much fun for me. So again, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you guys a little bit later. Bye.